Its number is still around 4,700,000. I will also ask Prime Minister Viktor Orbán what conclusions can be drawn from these data. Good morning. Good morning. In the GDP data, we are now seeing a situation from a month ago, at the end of December. What basis does this provide for the economy to continue to grow in 2025?
Good morning. Of course, the public will now know the data when it is officially and publicly released, but the government has the advantage of knowing the raw data. So when I talked about it being a flying start and a fantastic year, I knew what level we were at. So I didn't go to Luthery or bet on Lotto, but I knew these numbers and processes. There may be interesting correlations, which of course are difficult to demonstrate economically, but I am convinced that the US presidential election in November is in the data, because Trump's victory still means that the war phase will definitely end, and an era of peace will follow. And economic actors are such that if there is a war, they are cautious, and if an opportunity opens up and peace comes, and it is possible to do business and to invest and to take risks, and it makes sense to undertake, then they will get started. Well, I think that last year, but especially this year, this American tailwind will also swell the Hungarian sails in the economy. The other thing is cynicism. This is an interesting factor in economics because when a government or even a private actor sets some serious economic goal, we cannot say exactly in Hungary whether it is a majority or a minority, but a significant part of the public reacts cynically. It won't work out that way. I experienced this when we pledged in 2010 that we would create 1 million new jobs. A smile, little smiley faces on the internet, a wave, a little squirm, a little crabbing, of course, another round of slurping, and then 1 million new jobs were created. So it is very important that one factor of Hungarian economic policy is that the people who actually run the economy, because it is not the government that runs the economy, but the people who run it, believe that we are in a situation where serious things can be done. If we can either break through that cynicism or get around it, then the economy will boom. If we talk them down, because cynicism is talk they down, if we talk our own work out of setting serious goals, then it will not succeed. Now I'm fighting the same battle as I fought for the 1 million new jobs. It's called reaching the average monthly salary of 1 million forints. And I see that the same mockery and cynicism are going on, but we will do it, and it's already within reach. So we will reach the salary of 1 million forints per month. It is an encouraging sign, snowdrop, violet, you first spring flower, that we already have 4,000 teachers. Thanks to the teacher salary increases, we already have 4,000 teachers who earn over 1 million forints. So I want to say that there is great energy in the Hungarian economy. I could also say, contrary to the cynics, that there is a lot of money in the Hungarian economy. So now when we have to pay the interest on government bonds, which I think is a fantastic thing, 800,000 people have put their money in government bonds. And now they will have a pile of money. Right. If I take one person as a family, I can multiply that by 4. 3,200,000 Hungarians are worth to a family that has savings in government bonds. And this is only 1/10 of the total Hungarian financial savings, which is 90,000 billion forints. So if we break through the cynicism, that's why we launched the national consultation, which is always good for breaking through or getting around the wall of cynicism. And yet, 1,350,000 people said, "Come on, guys," about economic policy. So this is one of the maneuvers to get around cynicism. So if we manage to break through this, and we can get the money in the economy moving, the money that people have, I'm not even talking about businesses, that's another coffee shop. We can only get it moving about private individuals. Then I'll say it carefully, but we can have a fantastic year. And I look at these government securities savings because it's hard to know exactly what state families are in financially. I can read this from all kinds of sub-indicators. Now I looked at who has them, not by name, because I don't have that kind of knowledge, fortunately, but roughly what kind of people, what kind of economic situation people have government securities. And I found that you would think, right, that the richest people must have savings in government securities. But I found that, for example, about 50,000 people have government securities worth less than 1 million forints. Those who have government securities holdings between 1 and 5 million forints are 191,000 people. These are not the rich. Those who have between 5 and 10 million are 117,000. And those between 10 and 25 are 121,000. So I just want to say that I think it is a realistic goal. Cynicism here, cynicism there, to broaden the middle class and strengthen it. That by getting the economy moving, those who already have some savings, or those who simply live off work and want a higher wage, they will make extra efforts, and it will happen that the last quarter, to return to your question, the growth that is already visible in the last quarter, which means that the recession in Hungary is over, will be even higher growth next year. We have a vision based on the data for this year. So the economy will not accelerate evenly. The real serious pace of growth will be in the third and fourth quarters. But compared to previous years, especially the first quarter and the second quarter, will be nice. So when it will really be visible to everyone that we have truly entered a new era of growth, it will be felt in the third and fourth quarters, and I hope that it will continue in the 26th year.
You talked about cynicism in relation to analysts, but we see that in the population and in businesses there is not cynicism, but skepticism, because from COVID onwards, war practically followed, high inflation came, sanctions came, and there was a bad mood among people from an economic perspective as well. How can this wall be broken through, and how can the 21-point economic policy action plan, for example, help with this?
Cynicism works if it has a basis in reality. So the question is not whether there are difficulties, there are always difficulties, but the question is what we want to do with the difficulties. And we will overcome this in this way and this way. This is optimism, or I don't know what family, the hopefulness of action. The other, cynicism, says, yes, these difficulties are here, and they will certainly stay with us. This will never get better. It won't work anyway when we talk ourselves out of it. So we are undoubtedly in a war period. So there is a breeding ground for cynicism. There is a susceptibility, because we also suffered from COVID. We lost lives. The economy also stopped for a year and a half, and then this whole war period came along. Just because of the sanctions, which is, of course, Brussels' fault. But anyway, because of the sanctions, we have lost 6.5 billion euros every year since the war started. That's 19.5 billion euros in 3 years. That should be here in the economy. It is not by chance that people are ovate. It is not by chance that they have, for example, so much financial savings. They have money. They just don't want to put it into the economy and don't want to put it into motion because they see the whole world as uncertain because of the war. That is why the American election was important. The victory of the American president, literally from the point of view of the pockets of the Hungarian people, was an extremely important and useful outcome in world politics. He has spoken several times in recent weeks about the goal of strengthening the middle class.
This is partly a philosophical question, but partly a practical one, as to why the government is emphasizing this. Because the question is what the economy is for.
These hocus-pocus, GDP growth, are all very exciting things, and you can read a lot from them. What interests me about the Sun is how Joseph Kovacs, an honest outsider with 3 or 2 children, is doing. The economy should be about making his life better. And the life of the majority of Hungarians is that of the middle class. They work, they support their families with their work, and they usually own their own property. This is the category system of belonging to the middle class. And they are the majority. So if the Hungarian economy is to function, then the middle class must first strengthen and then broaden. Broadening means that those who are currently below the middle class should have the opportunity to earn more, to be able to enter the world where I have my own property. I am a self-sufficient person. This has all kinds of psychological consequences. I support my family through work, my house, my castle, and then suddenly the middle class not only deepens, not only does it get better and better for those who are part of the middle class, it also broadens. So the best medicine for poverty is to expand the middle class. We don't have to worry about the rich because they will manage their own lives. We have nothing to do with that. That is the government's economic policy. We should leave them there to invest their money, pay their taxes, and give jobs to as many people as possible. We really need to care about the middle class and people in lower positions. We need to give them a chance. This is the politics of middle-classization. This is what is actually called popular politics, when economic policy does not serve abstract liberal economic relationships, macro numbers, but is actually in the interests of the people. Trump also won with this. If anyone has been watching the American election, this is increasingly the case. European or Western politics is increasingly narrowing down to the question of whether we should leave this liberal nonsense. It's all very nice. And how do we live? And what is happening? And do we have a chance? And do our children have a chance? Will our children live better than us or worse? It is interesting that in Central Europe, they think that our children will live better, while in Western Europe, people tend to think, that is strongly, that their children will live worse. It is very difficult to give a push, to pull up an economy in such a way that the people living in it themselves expect that their children will live worse than they do. It is a general attitude in Western Europe. In Central Europe, we are not much better off here.
Part of strengthening the middle class is supporting retirees and the elderly, and accordingly, the 13th month pension will arrive in February this year. At the same time, the European Commission has a working document that expects the government to abolish this, and there are also voices at home that say this is not necessary, at least in this form. What should pensioners expect? What will be the fate of the 13th month pension in the long term?
The truth is that I think people do not know that the 13th monthly pension payments are a struggle. Or is it the result of a battle? It's not just about having to come up with the money. That's a nice task. We're talking about 500 billion forints. That's what we usually pay out at this time. We will, of course, talk about our own past. Because if we want to carve a victorious nation out of ourselves, and we want, with an eye to the cynics, to see a victorious nation, we must overcome the old troubles. And one of these old troubles that everyone remembers and was personal, and not only pocketbook, but also flesh and blood, is the 13th. Taking away a monthly pension. You cannot be a victorious nation if you cannot build on, renew, or re-achieve the achievements you have already achieved. So the 13th. Restoring the monthly pension, which was taken away during the Bina healing period. So if we cannot return this, then who will believe us that we are facing better times than the old period? So the 13th. The return of the monthly pension is also a condition for us Hungarians to believe that, of course, there were problems that left-wing governments caused all kinds of disturbances before 2010, but we have left that behind us. And at least we will achieve again what we once had, the 13th. The monthly pension is therefore a spiritual, psychological, political, and only then an economic issue. Of course, for pensioners, it is primarily a social and economic issue. But from the point of view of the national economy, it is about much more. That is why I am fighting. The people of Brussels want to take away the 13th month pension. They stipulate that this is not good, and that's why we're bringing it out. Before every heating season, these studies and recommendations come. They're called Brussels. When they want to force something on you and beat your socks off, they're called recommendations. And this must be rejected. And this must be defended. And then all kinds of sanctions and all kinds of discussions come. But we have defended it so far, and I insist on it because of what I said before. I also insist on it because of the pensioners and also because of the momentum that the 13th expresses. The return of monthly pension, because of faith and hope in the future. And for pensioners, this is very important. Wages are growing faster than pensions, but with the 13th month pension, we can bring the pension increase somewhat closer to the wage increase. Well, that's pretty much how we stand. I expect there will be such a battle. There are agents of this Brussels idea in Hungary as well. Well, the economists behind the opposition parties, I won't name names now, especially I won't bring women into this situation. They constantly impress upon us that this is not good. They don't dare to say take it away, but this is not good. All I can say is, hands off the pensions, hands off the 13th month pension.
Let's talk about economic growth and the emerging threats. The Hungarian economy has grown, while the German one has shrunk. And in Berlin, this year's expectations have also been significantly lowered. In addition, the Financial Times wrote that Volkswagen is open to Chinese car manufacturers taking over its excess European production capacities. How can the weakness of the German economy, or the situation of the European economy, affect Hungary's economic performance?
Let's talk a little about this German situation. There is no need to criticize the government of another country because it does not breed good blood, especially if it is bigger than that. If a piece of meat accidentally runs away, then it is not good for anyone. And so the German bear is doing a great job. So I'm cautious. Well, obviously everyone has the government they deserve. And it is undoubtedly true that early elections are being held in Germany for a reason. We can safely say that early elections are being held because of failures. But it must be seen that while the Germans also obviously make mistakes, it is actually Brussels that is destroying Germany. The most vivid example of this is a moving story. Brussels, claiming to protect European car manufacturers, introduced a punitive tariff on Chinese cars. I spoke to the management or leadership of all the major German car manufacturers, and they all protested against this. So while Brussels is referring to them, saying it wants to protect them, it is introducing something that they say will be bad for them. We are in the absolute situation that these car factories, these German cars, are suing Brussels, the Brussels Committee, which supposedly acted in their interest. Well, if there is such an economic policy in Brussels, then of course the Germans will go bankrupt. This is the case with us, of course, and it has an effect here too. We can protect ourselves from these things, right? Because the destructive effect of the bad economic policy decisions in Brussels is being felt by LASL 13-monthly pension, a national government that is used to fighting, just as we are used to fighting for national independence. It can mitigate the effects of this. We cannot, nor can I, completely eliminate the impact of Brussels' mistakes on Hungary, but we can significantly mitigate them, and we can always find something to compensate for them. But those who are Brussels-sites, like the Germans, are traditionally like that. They are in trouble if bad economic policy is being advocated in Brussels. They are not very good at defending themselves against it. And so the whole Green Deal, that's what they call it, this green transition, that Brussels, which is a good idea, by the way, is to make the economy greener, to make us live healthier, to make the air and water cleaner. When we produce, we don't destroy the environment, but rather build it. These are all great things. But in order to introduce such measures, you have to negotiate with those who run the economy. If you can introduce these measures against the ones who run the economy, say, the factories, the big industrial companies, you will destroy the economy. The green transition is a typical example of a good idea that could be done in cooperation with business actors, and then it would be successful. They try to do it against business actors, and it is certainly doomed to failure, and as a side effect, it will destroy some European economies, for example, the German one. Now, what is the impact of this on Hungary? Of course, I am not a fortune teller, but my job is to try to understand the future. I do not predict the future of what is happening in Western Europe today. So if the big states do not take it back, do not regain their independence, if they do not stand on their heels, but continue to divide the Estonian European economy while sitting in this Brussels bureaucratic elite bubble, and the big countries do not oppose this, then I do not give much of a future. We cannot predict the economies of the big European countries. There are signs of rebellion because here we have to rebel. So the Brussels people cannot be harmed. I know them. They will come back. They will use all kinds of devious tricks. So there we have to rebel. But now the Germans, for example, not yet in the economy, but migration has already started to rebel. So something happened in Germany in recent days that we did. Well, it was even mentioned in the German domestic political debates. The leftists told the conservatives that what you are doing, only Hungary has dared to do this before. Bravo, that's how it is. They should have done this in 2016 or in 2015 at the beginning of the migration crisis, and then they wouldn't be where they are today. There wouldn't be terrorist acts. There wouldn't be the economic situation and burden that migration means in Germany. So I see signs that Germans are just rebelling at a given moment. Not yet in the economy, but refugees are already there, or migration is already there. And the moment will come when I think they will revolt in the economy as well. But until then, unfortunately, I can't say anything good. This is bad for us because a large part of the products produced in Hungary go to the German and Western European markets. We shouldn't give up these positions, but we shouldn't stand on just one leg. That is why it is of strategic importance for us to cooperate with South Korea, Japan, Turkey, and to involve a part of the huge amount of money in the Arab world into the Hungarian economy. So, if we remain closed in our Western world, we will not break out of it. This is what we call connectivity. If we do not cooperate with other emerging parts of the world, which are developing much faster than Europe, if we do not integrate their resources into the Hungarian economy, then we may be in trouble. This is what we called the Eastern opening in the past, and its relevance is stronger today than ever.
He recently identified energy security and sanctions as one of the main threats to growth. The sanctions will certainly remain in force for another 6 months, but in exchange for voting for them, Hungary received guarantees related to energy security on Monday. How strong are these guarantees? I ask, because there were reports in Serbia that the Friendship oil pipeline in Russia might have been attacked. Yes, but then it turned out that this was probably more of a hoax, because the oil flow really stopped. But it was more of a technical error, so that the problem could be fixed.
Now the sanctions, let's talk about that. Well, first of all, the Americans and the Europeans are saying two diametrically opposed things. The Europeans are saying that the sanctions should be continued and even intensified in order for the Ukrainians to win the war in Russia. Yesterday, the American Secretary of State said in a major interview that it was dishonest to deceive the world by claiming that the Ukrainians could win this war. This is worth following, this great interview. That's why the Americans don't want sanctions, but peace. So the Europeans want sanctions instead of peace. The Americans want peace, and one of the means to achieve peace is sanctions. So they say negotiate. If you don't negotiate, even more severe sanctions may come. But these are two completely different coffee houses. The European logic is completely different from the American one. One is the logic of war, the other is the logic of peace. Now we are in constant consultation with Brussels, since we live in it, and with the Americans as well. So we see how things are developing. We negotiate on all issues. We also know when, where, what is happening in the sanctions cases, and we know what the Hungarian interest is. The Hungarian interest is that we lost 19.5 billion euros in 3 years. We have to get this back. Or at least we need to create years when this 6.5 billion euros per year is not lost to the Hungarian economy. In other words, the sanctions must be lifted. This is in the Hungarian position. We have never supported sanctions. We simply acknowledge that in Brussels, 26 out of 27 countries want sanctions. But we do not want to leave the European Union, and we do not want to constantly block everything. That is why we have constantly said that we do not agree. It is against our interests. Do not do it, but we will not veto it, because otherwise the entire European machinery will be paralyzed. But now the behavior of the Ukrainians is taking us to the point where we had to say stop now. So the fact that Ukraine refuses to let Russian gas pass through its territory so that it can reach Central Europe, and thereby raises the price of gas, as a result of which everything goes up, even fuel, is unacceptable. That is why we were forced to say very seriously and strictly that if they do not change this, then we will lift the sanctions now. Because even a country can do this. So if it really has to be, Hungary can say, well, now everyone should go home. Like in the Petofi poem, turn off the lights, everyone go home, sanctions are over. But this is a very harsh thing. So this should only be used as a last resort. And our problem is not with the philosophy of sanctions, that's another conversation, but with their impact on the Hungarian economy. So that's why we had to fight for guarantees in Brussels that Hungarian energy security would not be jeopardized by sanctions, and that sanctions would not lead to further energy price increases, which would then have to be paid for by the Hungarian people. And we asked for a guarantee for this. Among other things, the committee promised that it would arrange for the Ukrainians to let Russian gas through the territory of Ukraine again. So the Ukrainians depend on us. They cannot fight for a single day without us. Their economy won't work for a day without us. We just need to turn to them and say, my dear Ukrainian friend, we understand everything, but this is what we need. Let the Russian gas through. How do you want to get closer to the European Union if you're already fooling around with the Central European countries? Stop the march. We had to raise this now with such sharpness. We got the guarantees. I understand the cynicism and uncertainty. I also have a knife in my heart that I wonder if they'll keep them. But the situation is that sanctions have to be decided every 6 months. And if they are not respected, then not only will we reach the point where we will raise the possibility of sanctions being violated, but we will also cancel them. So if the committee does not respect this, which we agreed on, then the sanctions will end. Now we have to speak in this tone and in this strong context. Otherwise, they will look at us as suckers. And in the end, the Hungarian people will continue to pay the price of the sanctions, and even the Ukrainian impudence that while we finance their wars, we provide the money for the operation of their country. They take steps that make the lives of Europeans, including Hungarians, more difficult. Well, this is unacceptable.
We have a very short time, but it seems that the discussions related to the sanctions will remain with us in 2025. But at the same time, there is also disagreement on other issues between the Hungarian government and Brussels. What do you see as the most acute conflicts in 2025?
The government has just reviewed this minefield. We have a big list. There is this, right? The court cited us in a child protection law case. They can't let go of this nonsense, that instead of parents, they want to tell us what the process of becoming a sexual adult should be and how we should introduce our children to adulthood. This is impossible for us. We have been sued, by the way. Hungarian opposition members are also involved in this. The European Parliament parties sued Hungary to get the money that we had already fought for with great difficulty in Brussels. I won't recall the scenes of gnashing of teeth as we transferred that 12.5 billion euros to the Hungarians' accounts. Now the European Parliament, where the Hungarian opposition is also among the parties suing, is suing us to get this money back. Do you understand what I'm saying? That European parties, including Hungarian parties, are suing Hungary to get back the money they have already received from the Commission. And I don't want to use strong punitive categories, but what does such a person do with his country? Well, it's not in his best interest, that's for sure. And then, of course, we have the discussions on the issue of the reduction of overhead costs. They also want to abolish the reduction of overhead costs every year. Abolishing the reduction of overhead costs before the heating season, we have to protect that. There are these tariffs with which they punish a group of goods. and it would be important for Hungary not to be burdened by such tariffs. So there is a list of 7, 8 points on the battlefield where we have to maneuver skillfully in the next year. We won the battle in America. America now has a government that serves the people's interests, but the bureaucrats in Brussels have not changed. They abuse their power, and the fight against them will be a constant part of the Hungarian political agenda for the next year.
I also asked Prime Minister Viktor Orbán about the Hungarian growth figures released yesterday, their causes and European context, as well as the conflicts with the European Union.